Good afternoon. I'm Union County Commissioner John Showers and Chair of the SEDA-COG Joint Rail Authority. It is my privilege to welcome today the family of John Conrad, 78 of them, I am told. And in particular to welcome John's wife Elaine with us for these dedicatory ceremonies of the John P. Conrad Bridge. And it should be said that all of us outside of Elaine and John's family assembled here today, all of us from the SEDA-COG Joint Rail Authority, the North Shore Railroad Company and affiliates, state and local governments, federal governments in this community, are a true testament to the fact that we share in your family's deep loss. In speaking for authority members present today, and if you'll all rise when I call your names, and just kind of stay standing till I finish my brief remarks. Russ Graham, John Gummo, Brent Jones, David Schultz, Scott Harvey, Frank Dombrowski, Dr. John Spikalski, Jennifer Stover, Wakeman, excuse me. Jennifer's here. Eric Winslow, and former authority member and board chair Jerry Walls is with us as well. I can emphatically state for all of us standing that we have truly lost a treasured professional and friend who permitted us to move forward with our work with ease, confidence, integrity, and in a timely manner the public does not anticipate from a government agency. What Tropical Storm Lee on September 7th and 8th, 2011 wrought on this creek, this bridge, this railroad, John P. Conrad tamed and restored. The SEDA-COG Joint Rail Authority today says thank you, celebrating the life and good works of a faithful public servant. I would now like to turn the program agenda over to the SEDA-COG Joint Rail Authority Property Manager, George Fury, who worked so closely and tirelessly on our behalf with our bridge engineer. George Fury.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It was indeed a pleasure to work with John. John and I developed a very close relationship over, I'd say probably 12 or 15 years of going out into the field quite often daily at some point. And I often said that it was a day in the classroom with John. If you didn't take advantage of his knowledge, you were foolish. I picked his brain, and I think probably I sent him home with his head spinning sometimes because I wanted to learn every time I was out there. He was a consummate professional. And at times I think I had him scratching his head because I would pose questions to him. But I wanted to know because he was a textbook. He knew his stuff, and I often put him in a position where I said, look, I said, we're a short line railroad, but we need to do things on a Class 1 budget, and I need you to find a way to do that. And that's what I had him do out here on Loyalsock Creek. The day after the flood, when the bridge had been washed away and we're standing on the west bank, and we're having to step back about every half a minute or so as the embankment is washed away. And I looked at him and I said, hey, John, what do you feel about building me a bridge? And he got that little grin on his face as he normally gets, and he said, well, I think that would be fun. And I said, how about building me a truss bridge? He goes, that would even be more fun. And I said, can you do it with 2 trusses? And he goes, that would be a lot of fun. And he came back and he said, you know, later on he said, I can't do it because of the high tension power lines here. But this is what he came up with. And it's a hybrid bridge that meets our needs. And it's about 100 feet longer than what was there before because Mother Nature decided how wide the creek was going to be by washing out the western bank. Now, what the result is underneath is a waterway that's about 55% bigger than what it was before, volume-wise. And what it's done so far is it's spared Montoursville the flooding that would have impacted it severely 2 times since the bridge has been rebuilt. And that's significant. But I will tell you that one of my favorite stories that John told me I should not tell Elaine is that we were out on the Nittany, Maine, which is our 40-mile-an-hour railroad, and we were putting together a state project, a grant. And this was later. This is the last time John and I were out on the track together, and he was. We probably were walking on railroad that he should not have been walking on, because at that point he had become. He was having great difficulty with walking, and we were walking up and down some embankments, and he was trying to get down an embankment. I put my hand out, and he reached out and took my hand, and he stopped and he said, "Now, George," he says, "you cannot tell Elaine that we were holding hands." I said, "Don't worry, I won't." But he, even in his darkest moments, he still had a sense of humor. He often came down to the railroad, and he would sit with Elaine, or with Diana and Nikki, and would make sure that they were fine. That was his heart. But we knew a man who was had integrity, who had brains like you wouldn't believe, who met our needs as an authority, who could design something that's world class. He was quite a man, and that's what we're here to celebrate today. And we're going to bring up a few people who can speak to that and relate some stories. So the next person to come up and talk about that was John's second on this project, and that's Jason Shura, who is now with Stifler McGraw. He was with Keller Engineering, and Jason was mentored by John, and Jason has since become the authority's bridge engineer. So Jason Shura.
Thank you, George. Good afternoon. George has asked me to come here today and discuss a little bit about the bridge design and the construction. So you'll have to excuse the technical terms, but I know all of you knowing John, you've heard them all before. He loved to talk about what he did and all of the projects that he took on. So as you can imagine, it takes a large team, a dedicated team of people to deliver a project like this. And I was very fortunate to have met John in 2011 and to have gotten the opportunity to work with him on this project and many other projects. After the original bridge was washed out, there was federal, state, local funding quickly dedicated to the replacement of the bridge. Besides JRA and the North Shore Railroad, stakeholders included the Federal Railroad Administration, PennDOT Bureau of Rail Freights, Ports and Waterways, Lycoming County, the borough, FEMA, and PEMA. John assembled a team of folks that he trusted much as himself. Some of us at Keller Engineers were very fortunate to get that opportunity. We have a few people here today. Angela Riley, Kevin Campbell are here with us today, who are instrumental in delivery of the project, as well as many others. We had helped John with design of the replacement bridge. Also, Paul Giannotti and his son Sam were involved in some of the track design, as well as some of the inspection, and John's employee Rich Dalton as well. As we got started, John quickly identified the objectives for the project. The design of the replacement bridge not only needed to return service quickly on the Lycoming Valley Railroad, but needed to consider the frequent flooding that often impacted the borough of Montoursville, as well as minimizing impacts to Loyalsaw Creek, which is used by the surrounding community for recreation. Other considerations included the numerous utilities on site, and George mentioned that impacted the ultimate layout of the bridge and type of structure that was proposed, because many of those utilities would have been very costly to relocate. And lastly, the project included rehabilitation of a second bridge on the west end of the project that was impacted by some of the approach track work. The original structure, built in 1927, included 6 steel through girder spans totaling about 345 feet in length. The 3-span steel structure you see today includes a significantly longer structure totaling 485 feet. The approach spans are steel through girder spans with open timber deck system, approximately 120 feet long each, and those were proposed again to avoid the overhead utilities at the site. The main span is a steel Warren truss totaling 235 feet in length. This configuration overall was selected to minimize the number of piers in the stream, which was important to JRA and also to John in minimizing those impacts to the surrounding communities. Tropical Storm Lee, which is much larger than the typical storm that you would design a bridge to clear, was used as the basis for design, resulting in an almost 3-foot raise in the track and necessitating almost 1/2 mile of track upgrades. The open deck system was selected to minimize the track raise and also permit access for maintenance and, most importantly to John, inspection. In the end, because the cause of failure of the original structure was scour, and we identified almost 15 feet of scour at the site, John made the decision to place the structure on steel piles driven to competent bedrock, and that was done to ensure that the foundations would never be undermined and the bridge would last a very long time. Bids were received for the work on June 5th, 2013, and the project was awarded to Glenn HAWBAKER of State College on June 30th with a total bid price of $9.1 million. High Steel Structures was the steel fabricator. KW Reese performed all of the track construction, and there were numerous other suppliers, subcontractors, and other folks, designers for some of the construction submissions involved from throughout the Commonwealth. Construction started immediately to meet the aggressive 12-month schedule in order to meet the needs of the railroad and the community. And several challenges were encountered along the way, as you could expect with a project of this size. And John was instrumental from the very beginning in addressing anything that came up and leading the way through those challenges. Construction began here at the east end of the bridge, and almost immediately artesian springs were encountered in the east abutment and Pier 1 foundations. That necessitated the pumping of almost 8,000 gallons of water per minute in order to facilitate the work. With no place on site to discharge this much water, John worked closely with HAWBAKER, the contractor, and the Department of Environmental Protection to get a dewatering pond constructed in the channel approved, and he got that approved very quickly. Additionally, Pier 1 was raised approximately 2 feet, a pretty significant design change at that point in construction, and a tremie seal was poured by divers under approximately 20 feet of water at the pier to reduce those flows, so it was quite an impressive operation. A French drain system and sump pits were also installed at the east abutment to collect water and to get the water out of the excavation. Frequent flooding of Loyalsock Creek was a significant challenge throughout construction, and there were a number of delays. This included a 6-foot increase in the water elevation over about a 3-hour period in January, where some ice melt in a wetland upstream released some water. So the temporary causeways were frequently overtopped, had to be built from time to time, and equipment had to be removed and cleared from the causeway frequently. At John's direction, and with that in mind, when the truss was constructed, temporary towers were required to support the uncompleted structure. John made the decision that rather than place those towers on footings on top of the causeway that could get washed out, that those towers would be constructed on piles driven to bedrock to ensure that the investment that had been made to that point and all that hard work would last even if a flood did occur. A streamlined process for shop drawings was implemented with High Steel Structures, and actually both trusses that you see out there were constructed in entirety on their side at High Steel's facility in Lancaster, and we had an opportunity to go look at that. In fact, when they constructed the trusses and measured the total length, they hit the design length within approximately 1/16 of an inch, which was pretty impressive. With some of the delays, we had to pour some concrete during the winter months. And with the piers, there were some very large pours. We had 2 pours that exceeded 350 cubic yards, or about 35 trucks. That's a tremendous amount of concrete. So in addition to insulation on the forms, cooling pipes were actually installed in the concrete so that we could pump cold water and draw some of that heat from the center of those concrete pours and prevent cracking. And the approach worked very well. Under John's leadership and constant communication with the owners and contractor to maintain the schedule, the bridge was completed on time and the first train ran on July 2nd, 2014. The final construction includes over 1.5 million pounds of steel, over 2 tons of steel bolts used to make the connections in the structure, 2,300 cubic yards of reinforced concrete, and over 13,000 feet of steel H-piles driven for the foundation. John and JRA were also proud that this was an almost all Pennsylvania bridge, as you can see in the flyer, with the entire design team, contractor, fabricators, material suppliers, providing these services from within the Commonwealth. There's no question the bridge was constructed to stand the test of time, and how fitting it is that it will bear John's name after today. When each of us looks at the plaque to be placed on the bridge, and I hope you get an opportunity to come up and view the plaque on the table up here, it will mean something different to each one of us. I will be reminded of many lessons learned from John. As George said, John was a teacher. Any opportunity you had with John, he was going to use to impart his knowledge. And those lessons were both personal and professional. John was an amazing mentor and a better friend. And so many of those lessons and experiences, for me, happened right here. I will be reminded of the hours spent reviewing plans at my kitchen table and sending John a text or an email at 2 a.m. and getting a response 30 seconds later because he was up doing the exact same thing. I'll remember the progress meetings and the car rides where John would always take the time to teach, always coach. We'd often stop to get lunch at Buffalo Wild Wings on the way home. And if you've ever gotten lunch with John, you would understand he would never let us pay. In fact, it took me almost 7 years to finally buy the man a meal. And I can tell you it was probably one of the few times where I'm confident John was legitimately angry with me. I'll be reminded of one Monday morning as we were nearing the end of design. John came into the office and asked how long it would take to wrap things up. He was ready to move forward with the project. When I told John 3 weeks, he gave me that innocent smile and quiet chuckle that usually meant he'd either made a decision or he'd done something that I probably wouldn't like. He then told me he'd already mailed the ads to the newspaper that morning. The ads had been sent, so we had about a week to wrap it up. What came next was classic John, however. John was never negative. He told us, you know, we'd done all the work, we'd done it all the right way. He told us to trust ourselves and trust the process, and then if anything came up along the way, he would deal with it. John was always positive, always teaching and coaching, and always sharing credit with the people around him. Today we get to take the opportunity to recognize John for his contributions, for his accomplishments, and make sure the credit goes where it belongs. Because ultimately it was John's vision, his leadership, his experience, his guidance, and character that made this project a success. To Elaine and the rest of John's family here today, thank you for sharing John with us and allowing us to celebrate with you today. It's an honor to be here, and the recognition you all and John are receiving today is truly deserved. Thank you.
The email story reminded me, and we were out in North Dakota, Paul, John, and I looking at some railroads out there. John sent me an email at about 3:20 in the morning asking for a valuation map for a project, and he got a response at 3:22 with the val map, and 3:23 he says, "Don't you ever go to bed?" And I said, "What about you?" He goes, "We'll talk about it in the morning." So, and in the morning at breakfast, Paul said, "Yeah, I saw the email chain going back and forth, but I wasn't getting involved in it." So yeah, none of us sleep. But anyway, a project like this, the prime was Geo HAWBAKER, and as you can imagine, you need to have somebody who is the best. And I'll tell you what, we had a giant, I think, as far as supervising this kind of a project. His name is Bud Dover, and I would ask Bud to come forward and offer his comments if he would. Bud Dover.
I had prepared a speech for about an hour and a half, but these George and Jason, they stole all my thunder, so I'll cut it down to about 5 minutes. I wanted to personally thank everyone who has come here today to honor John. He was a great man, and I'm really thankful that I had the chance to work with him. I did some jobs before he started with the JRA. I did some jobs with him, and one that comes to mind most frequently is, and tells you what kind of a man John was, is that it was a small township bridge south and west of State College. And we bid the job and got the job, and after we finished the abutments, it was only a single-span bridge. He told me that the township did not have enough money to pay us to put the deck on the bridge. So, unbeknownst to me, I found out later that John came to the bridge on a weekend and helped the township supervisors put on the deck. It was a wooden deck, and they did it all themselves, and John told them how to do it. So that's the kind of man John was. When we got the plans for this present job here, I was glad to see that John was the designer of it, because I knew what John is, and the respect and knowledge, and I respected everything about him, really. But he had the knowledge and the professionalism and the common sense and experience and integrity that you don't always see anymore. And so as I got into the plans to prepare the estimate for it, the bridge, you could tell John put a lot of thought into it, and it was what looked to be a really enjoyable bridge to be able to build. And so I did my best to try to get the job. But a lot of things that I wanted to talk about, Jason covered here, so I'll abbreviate a little bit. As Jason said, we started on this abutment here on the east side and the pier closest to the east shore here. And as Jason said again, we had a lot of issues with the water. We placed cofferdams, steel sheet piling cofferdams around the abutment and the pier. And on a normal job, that would be able to reduce the amount of water coming into our excavation, that we would be able to pump it fairly easily. And because of the environmental restrictions, we have to pump. We can't pump dirty water into a stream. So we've started with a filter bag, which we normally use, and we pump it through the bag, and it filters out all the sediment. And so after about a half hour pumping into the first bag, it just blew up. And so,
Can you lean into and speak into it?
I'm sorry, George. Can you hear me now? So from there, we decided to try something else. There was a depression on the other side of the railroad here, out in the woods, that we thought we could use as an impounding basin. So we laid some pipe and hose, and we pumped a lot of water across the road, under the road actually, into that impounding basin, and we filled that up in a couple hours. So it was kind of up in the air what we could do next, but John came to the rescue again. He had a good rapport with the Department of Environmental Protection, and he called a meeting with them and us, and they actually suggested, which is something we had done before, but we didn't think of it. It was going to work at this point, but the DEP wanted it to work, and that was a silk curtain, which you place right in the stream, and it runs from the surface of the stream right down to the bottom of the stream, and it filters out the silt there. And that worked enough to satisfy DEP anyway. The water was still brown, but it didn't have silt in it. But we had, at one point, we had about 8 large 10 and 12-inch pumps pumping all that water, the 8,000 gallons a minute that Jason talked about, and it was quite an operation. But what we found out, that as we pumped more and more water, as we excavated down to the level that we needed to get to put the piles in, we noticed sinkholes on the outside of the cofferdam in the stream. And that just told us that we were circulating the water in the stream, and it came up through the bottom, and we were just circulating it around, pumping it out, and it was kept coming back in. So that's when John suggested that we use that Treme pour that Jason mentioned, and that was able to slow down the water enough for us to complete the excavation and put the piles in. And Jason also mentioned the cooling tubes that we had to put in the pours because they were large pours. Because of that slow work of getting there, we had to work through the winter to keep the job on schedule. And the forms, normally if you work in the winter, you insulate the forms to keep the concrete from freezing. But this one, we had to put the cooling tubes in because you don't want it to get too hot or it cracks. So it just seems like you're counterproductive there, but that works because we had to put temperature sensors in the concrete and constantly monitor those to keep the heat within a range there, so it didn't freeze and it didn't get too hot. Jason mentioned the small bridge on the other end of this larger bridge. Part of the refurbishing of that bridge was to paint it. And after talking with our painting subcontractor, we felt it would be easier to paint it at his shop rather than in the field, because you have to blast all the paint down to bare metal and the existing paint. And so we picked it up with our cranes and set it on a truck and took it to Lock Haven, and he repainted it and brought it back, and we set it back in place. But John, as Jason said, and George too, John was a very hard worker, and we used to chat from time to time about a lot of things, especially this job. But he would mention how when he worked in West Virginia for a railroad company out there, that he would have a project or an emergency shutdown where he had to do the job over a weekend, and his days turned into 72-hour days. And I kidded him one time because I know, being a one-man show, he was telling me all the places he had to go and what he had to do, and I said, John, you must work 24 hours a day. He says, no, I don't do that. He says, it's only 23. I have to take a shower. But over the past 50 years, I've built hundreds of bridges, but I can honestly say this one bridge has been my favorite, and that had to do a large part because of John and the good folks of JRA and numerous others. And I'm happy to have had the opportunity to be a part of that. And I will always be grateful to John to be able to call him my friend, because that's what he was. And I thank you.
Thank you, Bud. Is Bud Williams here? All right, Bud Williams is with Lycoming Supply, and Bud did the demolition of the damaged bridge.
Well, my name is Bud Williams with Lycoming Supply, as he already said. I had nothing to do with the new construction, so they've pretty well already gone over that for you. This is not really a great presentation. It took me about 10 minutes. But we performed the demolition of the old railroad bridge after the flood. And it's the site where the new railroad bridge, designed by John, built by HAWBAKER, now occupies. If you're at this dedication, I probably can't say anything about John that you either don't already know or that hasn't already been said by the prior speakers. What started out as an engineer-contract relationship blossomed over the years into a solid friendship. And it just seems like John had that ability, whether it was Lycoming Supply and myself, or Bud and HAWBAKER, Reese and the railroad ties and the rails. It just seemed that no matter who John was involved with, he became your friend. We shared a lot of stories over the years about jobs and family. When my mother passed away, John drove from Altoona to attend her service. He was a man's man, and we'd all do well to emulate John's life, both professionally and personally. It truly was my honor to know him. Honor, dedication, honesty to everything he was involved in was paramount to John, whether it was work or family. Working with and for John was something I really look forward to. Can you imagine getting out of bed in the morning, every morning you were going to be working with John, and can't wait to get to work? When a question or problem arose, he was there on site, regardless of rain, snow, heat, or time of night, until things were back on track. And that just wasn't every once in a while, that was every time. I don't know how many jobs I was lucky enough to do with John, but it was quite a few. John had that rare ability to maintain his client's best interests, while at the same time maintain the full trust and confidence of his contractors. When I bid his jobs, I gave my very best price for two reasons. Number one, I wanted to get the work, naturally. And number two was to make sure no other company got the job and came to realize how good John was to work with. I wanted to keep him my secret, shared only with a few other select contractors. Our foreman fought over who was going to run the most recent job of John's that we were awarded. They all loved him, knowing from our many conversations how much John's family and especially his grandchildren meant to him. Lycoming Supply is honored to have played a small part in this project and to have been included in this dedication. He called this bridge his crown jewel, but made sure he distributed credit where it was due. He'd be very proud to know his name will live on through it. Thank you.
Thank you, Bud. And Mark Morosky from the county, if you'd like to come forward.
You know, I was watching TV the other day, and I saw on the TV that it was going to be Infrastructure Week. And I thought, oh boy, this is interesting. But I thought to myself also sitting here that every week was Infrastructure Week to John Conrad. Okay, he lived it. And, you know, if you think about it, our nation's infrastructure is crumbling. There was a recent report card by the American Society of Transportation Officials that said our infrastructure is a D+. I know when you went to school, same as when I went to school, D+ is not good and it needs work. So to get us out of this mess, obviously, we need a whole lot of increased investment, and we need a whole lot of John Conrads. Now, you see, John understood the need to invest in our infrastructure. John understood the bridges that he designed needed to be functional. And John understood the bridges needed to be designed to last. John understood that oftentimes bridges needed to serve more than a transportation purpose, and that community needs also had to be taken into account. And we mentioned the flooding issues earlier here for Montoursville. And John understood that we cannot take forever to complete projects, and that some projects have a real-time sensitivity to avoid more serious impacts. John understood the big picture and the minute details. That is a very rare quality. I've worked on dozens of projects here in Lycoming County over my 33 years, and I've worked with hundreds of engineers. And it was a rare day that I met somebody of John's caliber that understood both the big picture and the minute details. That's unique in my mind. John understood that fixing bridges have a public cost, and that innovative and cost-effective design solutions need to be developed to ensure project delivery. And boy, did John deliver on this particular railroad bridge project. This bridge is a symbol of John's excellence at a trade that he loved. And naming this bridge after him today will remind our present and future generations that the need for the engineering excellence never goes out of style. I'm also glad that, oftentimes you go around and you see or you don't see where these railroad bridges are, and that only the railroad folks running the trains over the bridge really gets to see the bridge on a daily basis. But this bridge is in a great spot where most of the people in the community get to see it all the time with just driving over the Broad Street Bridge. So I'm really glad of actually where it is, and now that it improves the flooding condition in the borough, even another plus. Now, Ben Franklin once said, "To be esteemed, be useful." And John understood. Thank you.
So we'll continue on with the agenda, and the Lycoming County Board of Commissioners have a resolution to present by Commissioners Jack McKiernan, Tony Massari, and Rick Marabito. Commissioners. Thank you. Elaine, if you come forward.
I'm Commissioner Rick Marabito, and I just want to say thank you to John, but also thank you to his parents for raising such an incredible person. Thank you to his family for sharing him with us, and for obviously loving him in a way that allowed him to share himself with our community. We're going to be forever grateful, and we're going to make sure that people know what he did for us. County of Lycoming resolution. Whereas the life and achievements of John B. Conrad are being celebrated at a public ceremony sponsored by the SEDA-COG Joint Rail Authority and Lycoming Valley Railroad Company on July 26, 2019, dedicating the newly reconstructed railroad bridge spanning the Loyalsock Creek in the county of Lycoming as the John P. Conrad Bridge. And whereas the new Loyalsock Creek Railroad Bridge, owned by the SEDA-COG Joint Rail Authority, completed in July 2014, replaces the former structure destroyed by the devastating effects of the Tropical Storm Lee flood of 2011. And whereas this railroad bridge functions as an essential component of quality railroad infrastructure, serving numerous regional industries, providing family-sustaining jobs, with loss of the former bridge posing emergency conditions requiring immediate attention.
And whereas the professional expertise, dedication, and skill of John P. Conrad, acting as bridge engineer for SEDA-COG Joint Rail Authority, is hereby recognized by Lycoming County Board of Commissioners for incorporating innovative, cost-effective, truss bridge design solutions that resulted in the very timely completion of a railroad bridge that both meets the region's growing freight rail needs and reduces the severity of flooding in Montoursville community. Whereas it is appropriate that the new Loyalsock Creek Railroad Bridge be named the John P. Conrad Bridge as a lasting tribute to his great contributions by quickly designing an outstanding rail infrastructure project that will provide lasting benefits to the County of Lycoming and surrounding region. Now therefore be it resolved, the Lycoming County Board of Commissioners enthusiastically join with the SEDA-COG Joint Rail Authority and its many partners in celebration of naming the new railroad bridge over Loyalsock Creek as the John P. Conrad Bridge, and extend our sincerest gratitude to the Conrad family for his exemplary service and support to our communities. In witness hereof, we have set our hand and seal the 26th day of July, 2019, Jack McKernan, Chairman, Tony R. Macera, Vice Chairman, Richard Marabito, Secretary.
One of the things that has been not mentioned is that this bridge was designed to accommodate a levee around Montoursville Borough. So that's already been taken into account. Next, Pennsylvania House of Representatives has a citation to present, and State Representative Jeff Wheeland and Garth Everett, and it'll be presented by State Representative Jeff Wheeland.
Thank you very much, George. Seeing as how your seats aren't padded, and I'm between you and the snacks in the back, I'll give a very abbreviated version. But one of the things I just wanted to mention is this comes under the category of everything happens for a reason. The prior Board of Commissioners, again, for those that don't know, my prior life, I was a county commissioner here in Lycoming County, but the board prior to me, and perhaps even the board prior to that one, we were working on this project for a trimodal bridge. It was to encompass rail, it was to do the road, automobile access to the airport, and it was also, where's Jerry Walls? It was right there, Jerry. It was also to include the bike path. Well, as a result of that horrendous storm in 2011, and our railroad bridge was taken out, and we were in a jam. But the good news is that because of that storm, we got a new airport terminal because we directed a lot of the funds that those boards of commissioners, including the one that I served on, had gathered up, and we were able to move those funds, a significant number of them, to the new terminal here in Williamsport at the airport. So that was the good news, and I think the other good news is if that storm wouldn't have happened, we wouldn't have been blessed with the services of Mr. John Conrad and the magnificent structure that we just witnessed. It actually works, doesn't it? You know, saw a train go over it, and hopefully for many, 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 many years, we'll be able to utilize that bridge. But it does give me great honor to bring a citation from the House of Representatives and present it to your family. 78 here? Yes. Direct, indirect, family member. Holy cow. I'll bet you Thanksgiving's a hoot at your house. So, okay, I'll give an abbreviated version because the Commissioner's citation covered a lot of the points that were in the House citation. So, whereas John P. Conrad is being honored posthumously upon the dedication of a railroad bridge spanning the Loyalsock Creek in Montoursville as the John P. Conrad Bridge during a ceremony which is being held this day in July 26, 2019. Now, therefore, the House of Representatives of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania pays tribute to the late John P. Conrad upon his well-deserved recognition, proudly notes his exemplary record, as we all heard earlier, his record of service and contributions in keeping with the highest ideals of this Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and directs that a copy of this citation, sponsored by myself, Representative Jeff Wheeland, and Representative Garth Everett, on this July 26th day, be transmitted to the family of John P. Conrad. It's signed by myself, Representative Everett from the 84th District. As a matter of fact, you're in Garth's district right now. if you want to walk across, well, I guess we're not allowed to walk across that bridge, but you could walk across the Montoursville Bridge and you would be in my district. So that's how close the districts, and this was such a critical piece of infrastructure for both the 83rd and 84th legislative district. But again, it's signed by myself, Representative Everett, and a good friend of mine, Speaker of the House, Pennsylvania House of Representatives, Mike Turzai. So it gives me great honor to present this to you.
Next, presenting the PA State citation is State Senator Judy Ward on behalf of Gene Yaw as well.
Note to self, comfortable shoes, sensible shoes. I just want to tell you what an honor and privilege it is to be here today. I hail from Blair County. Many of the folks here also hail from Blair County. And it is with great pride that I bring a citation, but also a little bit of personal disappointment. And that disappointment is that I never knew John Conrad. And I believe I would have been a better person had I known him. When you read his bio, it's just a bit overwhelming because he accomplished so much and he gave so much, he gave back. Senator Yaw and I bring a citation from the Pennsylvania Senate. I would like to read just a portion of it. It lists his contributions and all the things he did, but there's a part of it that I'd just like to share with you. It says, any definition of a full and productive life must include service to others through his many initiatives to benefit his community, and by his personal example, Mr. Conrad clearly reflected the true spirit and mission of this Commonwealth. Now, therefore, the Senate of Pennsylvania pays tribute to the late John P. Conrad upon his richly deserved recognition, affirmatively states that he was a shining example of community spirit whose many contributions are worthy of deep gratitude and respect. And it directs that a copy of this document, sponsored by Senator Judy Ward and Senator Gene Yaw, who was not able to be here today, be transmitted to the family of John P. Conrad. And it's signed by Joe Scarnati, who is the President Pro Tem of the Pennsylvania Senate. It is such a pleasure and honor to be here. Elaine, thank you for your... Yes, thank you for everything. I do have to note, I'm going to have to scoot out here shortly. I have to care for my 96-year-old mom tonight, so I have to get back on the road, but thank you. It was such an honor to be here.
Thank you. And from the United States House of Representatives, congressional recognition, letter signed from Congressman Fred Keller, as presented by the Congressional District Director, Ann Kaufman.
Good afternoon. As was said, my name is Ann Kaufman, and I'm Congressman Fred Keller's District Director. Unfortunately, he's in Washington, D.C., and unable to be here for this celebration, but I'm thrilled to be here on his behalf to celebrate the accomplishments of John Conrad. On behalf of Congressman Fred Keller, the United States House of Representatives formally recognizes the numerous and outstanding lifetime contributions of John P. Conrad and his family, who proudly served this nation, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and our local communities. While I did not know John, it's clear by what was said here today that his accomplishments are worthy of high praise and public acknowledgement. So if I could just take a minute to read the Congressman's citation. This certificate of recognition is presented to the family of John P. Conrad in acknowledgement of John P. Conrad's outstanding lifetime contributions and achievements in advancing the betterment of the nation's vital short line railroads. in recognition of his contributions to the safety, preservation, and improvement of the nation's railroad infrastructure. This certificate is hereby awarded on this, the 26th day of July, in the year 2019.
Thank you, Ann. And a letter from United States Senator Bob Casey, presented by U.S. Senate District Director Kim Byerly.
Good afternoon. Thank you for all being here to honor this great man and for allowing me to speak. Senator Casey is unable to join us, but he sent a letter to be read to the family and friends. Dear family and friends of Mr. Conrad, I want to offer my warmest congratulations on naming of the railroad bridge spanning the Loyal Saw Creek in honor of John P. Conrad, a 30-year member of the Tyrone community and leader in advancing the nation's public infrastructure. It is fitting this bridge, replacing the former structure destroyed by the Tropical Storm Lee flood of 2011, be named after John as a tribute to his decades of proud service to his community and our Commonwealth. John's development of an innovative and cost-effective truss design that is functional, resilient, and aesthetically pleasing is a hallmark of his career of engineering innovation. John's legacy stretches beyond the Montoursville community as he managed projects throughout Pennsylvania and the East Coast and worked with the Federal Railroad Administration to develop a bridge management program to ensure worker safety and structures that our communities can trust for years to come. John's dedication to his community and a future of world-class rail infrastructure included formation of the first and only railroad engineering program offered in the United States, implemented by the Pennsylvania State University Altoona campus. With its creation, students will be able to continue John's legacy of excellence in engineering. Through improving the safety, efficiency, and resilience of our Commonwealth's railways and water systems, John left a legacy of safe and reliable infrastructure for future generations throughout our Commonwealth and our nation. I am grateful for his many years of dedicated service. Please accept my best wishes and congratulations on this well-deserved honor. Sincerely, Bob Casey, Jr., United States Senator.
Thank you, Kim. You should know that aside from building structures for us, John did leave the authority other things. One of those was the development of the bridge management program, and what you should know is that the folks at FRA who put together the bridge management program are gentlemen that John worked with at CSX. So he had a hand in putting together the bridge management program itself. And we were one of the first organizations in the country to have our bridge management program together and complete. And we were sort of a blueprint that the rest of the country followed. So we were on the crest of the wave of the program that the rest of the country did, in fact, copy, I guess you would say, going forward. So he kept us at the forefront. Also, we have our bridges ranked for work. We have RTAP grants written into legislation that we can go after for getting work done on our bridges and structures. So he was very integral in identifying and ranking our structures for repairs going forward. So it was quite integral in helping us to identify and actually just, establishing the work that we need to do going forward to ensure that our railroads are functional and that we address those things which we need to address in a timely manner so that we do not have downtime on our lines. So the next thing we're going to do is talk about education. Without knowing it, John built a monument to his engineering prowess. This is a reflection of his education and his experience. This will stand for 100+ years. But he was all about education, so it seemed only logical to maybe establish a relationship with Penn State, the nearest, his alma mater, but the nearest program in the region that we could maybe partner with and establish a relationship with, to maybe be a living laboratory for them to work with, and also maybe to establish a scholarship program with in John's name, and that's what we've done. So to announce that, I'd like to bring forward Marianne Amato and Stephen Dillon from Penn State to announce the John P. Conrad Engineering Fund and Award, and they'll explain it, and we'll go from there.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. And on behalf of Penn State Altoona and the Pennsylvania State University, we are honored to be here today and to celebrate this wonderful man. And although we did not know John personally, we know what he's done and what he's done to secure our transportation needs throughout the Commonwealth and most other places. So I have to tell a little story. When I first met George, it was last fall at the Rail Symposium, and George had said to my colleague and I that he wanted to do something special, and this is very special. So I'd like to introduce Steve Dillon. He is the director of our Rail Transportation Engineering program at Penn State Altoona, the only baccalaureate degree in the country, and he will talk a little bit about the two endowments that have been established to honor John. And from what all of you have said, I feel like I know this man, but I think from what you said, his life now, his legacy will live on in perpetuity throughout these two endowments at Penn State Altoona. So thank you.
Hello, my name is Steve Dillon. I am with the Penn State and the Rail Transportation Engineering program that we have at Altoona. The two endowments, the John P. Conrad Rail Transportation Research Award, will be used to further educate our students, just like this bridge here is used to service the community and the rail industry for generations to come. This fund and the preceding fund, the John P. Conrad Rail Transportation Engineering Research Fund, they will be used to educate the next generation of engineers coming through the Penn State Rail Transportation Engineering program. These students will utilize these funds to learn the methodology that John had used in designing and developing such a critical project for our infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you.
So just a little more. Each fund, there are two fund bases. Each one is a $25,000 start, a base, so to speak. The railroad has established an award. The award portion of it puts about $1,250 directly into a student's pocket. The authority's portion goes towards classroom equipment, materials, travel expenses, that type of thing. So each one of you who received an invitation in the mail also received a donation card inviting you to donate directly to either the fund or the award to grow that so that more than one student would receive a $2,500 award each year. So that's the goal, is to try to actively grow that each year through inviting people to donate to it. The idea is that in perpetuity, we would have a $50,000 grant that would, from here on out, one student a year would get $2,500 towards his schooling costs. And each fall, we'll have a luncheon, and the Conrad family will present a student with that scholarship. So that's the nuts and bolts of it, and I would ask that you would all, we've already had some interest in it and some donations, and would ask that you would seriously consider becoming a part of that, because it would go a long way, and John would live on through this scholarship. So I'm going to give some personal comments here, then we're going to hand out some memory kind of stuff to some family members. And then Jeff Stover, the executive director for the authority, is going to come up and give some closing comments, and then we'll dismiss. So, all right, Paul Giannotti had integral part. He took care of the track portion of this, and I overlooked him, and I apologize for that. And here he is, Paul Giannotti.
Thank you. Call me an agenda breaker. All right. I'm a track dog, and I do the track work for the SEDA-COG Joint Rail Authority. I had the pleasure of working with John on numerous projects, and the underlying result of working with John on all those projects, and to best sum up everything, and it's been said here before, it's fun. I mean, he's a fun guy. We took a couple of trips to West Virginia to take a look at some projects. And we talked the whole way across 2 states and laughed all the way back. And it wasn't all about railroad track and bridges, believe me. I looked forward to more. He's dedicated to his family and his bridges, to his family in that order first. And as been said, the continuation of railroad engineering and practice. John is the greatest example that I ever had so far in my life of generativity, like Maslowian and Ericksonian generativity, where, you know, they're looking out for the next generation. And he's the guy that was looking out for the next generation of new railroad professionals, which this new scholarship fund speaks to. I never known anybody like that in my lifetime so far. He's given his best to his clients, and in my opinion, and that is the best. He's a prince of a man. He's the king of railroads, bridges, king of railroad bridges. Practical, loyal to his family and friends, and just a pleasure to be around. And oh my God, I'm going to say something here that nobody said so far. Details. I mean, this man is the definition of details, and they should be for a guy that's a bridge engineer, and what's made him so good. The global aspect, yes, but he knows the details, and he always did. If there are bridges in heaven, if there are railroad bridges in heaven, I'm sure they're all in pretty good shape, but if there's one that's not, I bet he has a plan for it. On many public occasions, functions, presentations, whatever, we would get together and talk, you know, and basically say, you know, we'd tie, not. Well, I wanted him to see me today, because with the tie and, well, the jacket's in the, it's kind of like, you know, we'll get him worked up. God bless you, John. We love you, we miss you, and God bless his family for sharing him with us. We're better people because of John Conrad. Thank you. Thank you.
So when I was talking with a few of his family members earlier today, we sort of agreed on one thing. If John were here, he'd be a little red-faced, but he would be smiling that little grin, because he would be very pleased with this. There's some pride there. He'd be very happy he was being recognized for this, because this was his baby. He was very good at what he did. But we had some good conversations. It was more than just a professional relationship. John was like a brother. We had some very, very, very deep discussions on faith. I'll see him again. We're Christian brothers. We believe in Christ. You know, we walk the same walk, and so I have no problem knowing that I'll see him again. But he was detail oriented. Talked about 2 tons of bolts, 25,000 bolts in that structure over there. And one of his favorite stories was the picture with the hand sticking out of the portal on the top. Okay, and the request from the guy, make the portal a little bit bigger next time so I can get out a little more easily. you know, so there's lots of stories, you know. Family knows this guy really well. If you were professional and you got to know him a little bit, you were lucky, okay? But like I say, every day on the track with him was a treasure. And there was a lot to learn from him. There's a lot to take away from him. He was a giving man. There's a story Diana was relating today about the hitchhiker he picked up in Texas, took him all the way to Virginia, and he talked to him the whole way, and he helped this guy out. That's just the way he was. So if you knew him, you were blessed. If you're just learning a little bit more about him today, you're blessed a little bit more. So, Lonnie, if you could come forward and help us out. Elaine will hand out these things. And family members, I'm going to call your name. If you could come forward, we're going to hand out some things for you to take home. Brianna Leahy, Hillary Wirtz, Courtney Miller, Ken Adams, Kelly Patterson, Kristen Hypes, Crystal Wary, Jessica Garzarelli, Amanda Beck, Francis Conrad, Jody Bowl. Eleanor Kearney. DeSales Works. Mary Rose Adams. Charlene Conrad. Mark Conrad. And Jean Ann Beck. And we could have the 3 grandchildren come on up, Julia, Anna, and May. We could have Tyler, Byron, and Heather come on up. And have her give it to her father-in-law. We can do that, yeah. And then if the family wants to hang around afterwards, we can get a full family photograph. And then the board members and the family together will get a photograph if you'd like. So, Jeff, you're on. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you, George, for emceeing this celebration of John P. Conrad, professional engineer, and the dedication here. Before I make some closing quick remarks about John, first I want to thank the folks that actually put together this whole event, which is really great, and that's the employees of North Shore Railroad, principally Diana Williams, Lonnie March Briner, and also Nikki Reedy. If we got Reedy, can we have a round of applause for those three ladies, please? Thank you. Also want to recognize our board that Chairman Showers introduced earlier at the beginning of this event. A lot has been said about John P. Conrad, and certainly he was a brilliant engineer, giving man. Hard to replicate what was said here before. Anything new. I was certainly so glad to work with him for many years. And this project that you see here, of course, was the crowning achievement. It would be a crowning achievement for any bridge engineer. But he did a heck of a lot of other projects for us, as you heard here this afternoon, and we really benefit. The whole system benefits greatly. I remember him telling me, "I'm building this bridge for 100 years, and it will last 100 years." But the flip side is his good works we see here. The other side was the good works he did with integrity, ethics, honesty, and just a caring attitude he set the bar really high. And I really admired him greatly, and it's inspired, to be kind of be like John. He cared so much for his clients that his hourly rate was pretty low. If he had been with a big firm in Philadelphia, it would have been double that or more. In fact, it got so that after a number of years of the low rate, that the chairman at the time, Mr. Walls, said, "John, you can go up a little bit in your rate." And he did. I think a year or two later, finally went up like $10 an hour, and that's just how he. That just a man is what he does, and he did a whole lot of good. But the one thing I do remember every time I was with him, whether it was in fellowship, over lunch after looking at a project, or at an engineering exercise or a difficult problem we're trying to solve, he was always smiling because he was totally enjoying his work and with the people and the railroaders that he worked with all the time. And yes, I'll look at his bridges and remember John, but the one thing I remember was John's smile. Thank you for coming. I think, Elaine?
Good afternoon. My heartfelt thanks go out to so many people on this special, special day. First of all, my family and I would like to thank the SEDA-COG Joint Rail Authority and the North Shore Railroad, especially Jeff Stover and George Fiore for the inception of this idea. Many thanks also to Diana Williams and Lonnie Martz and Nikki Reedy for their work in pulling it together, and everyone else at the Joint Rail Authority who helped bring this dedication to fruition. We also thank the state and county dignitaries who are here today and who honor John with their comments. We thank those who had working relationships with John and who have shared their sentiments and stories about him. Speaking of stories, Rich, anyone else, is there a book in the works? I'm sure we could fill one. Thank you also to all who worked on the Loyalsock Bridge. The engineers, the AutoCAD operators, the contractors, the inspectors, the secretaries, and more. We thank our family and friends who came here to honor John as well. Lastly, I knew this would be my sticking point. I thank Heather, Tom, Byron, and Tyler for the love and support. I also thank May, Anna, and Julia for being such bright stars in their Pap's life. And I also have to, a lot of the comments, while I'm getting a little choked up, I'll just say this now, a lot of the comments about John's integrity and honesty, you really only have to glance over to the front row and to see the man sitting there, his father and his mother. about, George stole a lot of people's thunder and all these stories. I was going to tell about John being here and looking at the bridge during the damage with George, and George was telling me he was going to build a bridge, and he says, oh, great. And that would be my point, just to say again, everyone else has said how much John loved his work. A day on a bridge was a wonderful day for John. It's a legacy to a man who loved his work. It wasn't a job, it was fun for him. This is a legacy to a man who treated others fairly and respected their ideas, even though he probably ended up doing it his way. It's a legacy to a man who was well respected in his field because of his experience, his work ethic, and his demeanor. I know he was proud of this bridge, but I think he would be shaking his head at all of this, but I know he would be proud and be honored. Quick story. The family and I on Sunday went down to West Virginia to Sproul Bridge and Sproul Tunnel. And I had to laugh at myself. I was with friends last evening, and I was telling them about this trip, and I started channeling John. I'm giving facts about the bridge and telling about the project, and I usually if he'd be taught, you know how those railroaders can talk, I would be rolling my eyes at some point, but I thought, John, you're here. I also thank the SEDA-COG Joint Rail Authority and the North Shore Railroad for creating the two endowments with Penn State Altoona, which offers the only railroad engineering BS degree in the country. The John P. Conrad Rail Transportation Engineering Research Fund and the John P. Conrad Rail Transportation Research Award will benefit a student directly and benefit the railroad program each year. Both the dedication of the Loyalsock Bridge in John's name and the two endowments at Penn State Altoona in John's name are amazing tributes to this man who was loved by his family, his friends, and his co-workers. I cannot thank you enough. I don't have words for how wonderful this day is. I really don't, which means so much to us. Thank you, and God bless you.
I got directions from the MC in the back. Thank you for coming. Enjoy some refreshments here at the back of the room.